So what can happen on our journey of helping ourselves? And when we help ourselves, we find something and we kind of often want to help other people, is we go through different approaches or understandings or techniques in our journey through helping ourselves and helping other people. We learn various things, have insights in various ways. And then what can happen, we can get a little bit stuck in feeling that this is the only way, or this is the best way, and other ways aren't as good. It's a bit like you're this wonderful river and you go off on a gully, then you kind of get a bit stuck. So my point of this first bit is you have to be human-centric, not approach-centric. What do I mean? What will give you the biggest results, the deepest results with people? Okay. You don't have to be so attached to what you do with people or what that's called or how that is taught. Go before to being human and keep being the eternal student and keep exploring. Now, we've had a training academy for 20 years. We've spoken to, I don't know, maybe 5,000-6,000 people over that time. And what we have found from that experience is many approaches. In fact, I'm going to do a diagram. So if this is the whole person, okay, you've kind of got, I don't know, this is a metaphor. It's all spiritual, okay? It's because we're all energy. But for the purpose of this, let's just say this is their spiritual part, their energetic part. Then you've got, I don't know, their thinking, their cognition, their belief system, which is a little bit more kind of like, which is a little bit more psychological based. Then you maybe have their body. So I'm going to put body. I'm going to put energy. I'm going to put cognition. What's another one? Energy, body, cognition.
Biochemical, electromagnetic.
Okay, chemical, yeah, biochemical. Biochemical. Again, this is all energy, but let's just say it's like that for now. Now, what happens, and I'm going to get to the point of this webinar, so bear with me, I'm just trying to set it up. There is a reason for my madness. Is many approaches can just look at the cognition and miss the spiritual, or can be ultra spiritual and miss there's a fundamental way in which humans work. Or others can be very into the body, the soma, the body, and completely miss the cognition or the energy. You kind of get my point here. Now, what we have found, whether you want to help others as a coach, therapist, family member, friend, parent, is you have to take the whole beingness of a person into account if you really want to help them. We are going to be doing different webinars on different seeming parts of the whole. But again, just so I'm not misunderstood, there aren't parts of the whole. It's one whole, one system in different vibrations. I'm going to draw a pretty picture. So for instance, as a metaphor, a rainbow, there's one rainbow, but the light for the medium of the water in the air, it splits one rainbow into its different wavelengths. And wavelengths are all different frequencies, hence creating purple and blue and red and yellow. Now, you could look at the body and the cognition could be red, energy could be yellow, the body can be blue. And we found that specific single-colored centric understandings miss the whole. Give us a head nod if I'm making sense so far. Okay, so That's very good. Thank you, honey. So when you take the whole rainbow into consideration when you're working with people, you have better results. Now, okay, so what we found is you can have, okay, disclaimer. What I'm going to say, and as we go forward, you may not agree with, okay, or you may think differently, and you're welcome to put it in the chat when we have the break, and we can talk about that. But what we found is that you can have a very deep spiritual insight of oneness or presence or expansion. But then there can still be stuff in the body, automatic responses, that gets in the way. I've met 3 enlightened people. They all had triggers, very much so. So it's a belief that all you need to do is have an insight and you're good to go. It is partially true, but it's not wholly true. You could go into the body, and we're going to talk about that shortly, and gain a lot of awareness of the body. But unless you've had a deep spiritual insight, you're still missing parts. So it has to be whole, hence why we call ourselves, or are understanding, wholality, meaning wholeness of being. So we're specifically just going to talk about the body on this webinar, because we can't really cover everything in 15 minutes. So we're just going to talk about the body. So, Jules, talk about the body, neuroception, polyvagal, bottom up, top down. I mean, you don't have to, that's all lingo, but.
Right. Okay. So before I really truly understood what I was seeing, I had a real traumatic experience. Well, I had a bunch of traumatic experiences, but I had a sudden cardiac arrest. And it was before my daughter was in her fatal car accident, but after they took my son. So I could see energy and the flow of energy. And I could understand see little blockages within my whole being. And that's where I know a lot of you heard me say we're biochemical, electromagnetic, plasma-like beings, because that's what I saw. And so I started working with myself, and then that birthed the emergent process of compassion flowed through, and I wanted to help other people, so I did. And I could see when communing with these people and pointing them back to their wholeness and understanding and holding space with them, for them, with compassion, their energy began to flow. So I saw energy. I wrote in our book, thought is a physical thought is a manifestation of our inner energetic dwelling. Thought is a mirror of what's going on inside. But that's all I knew. That's all I could explain. And then 1 year ago, I saw Dr. Gabor Mate talking. Who's this guy he's talking to? So I pushed play, and it was Dr. Stephen Porges. And I fell off my bed, literally, because he was explaining the physiology of the body. He was putting a science to what I saw. And I lapped it up. He's now my teacher, my mentor. And we just did an interview with him in support of Maui, the wildfires of Maui. But the body has these subtle messages that so often get overlooked. So if we are, is it okay if I draw something?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to give these guys a link to that interview while you're doing that.
Okay. So
I've just put a link in the chat. You don't have to click it now, but that is a link to the interview we just did with Stephen Porges that Jules mentioned. Anyway, carry on, honey.
So this is what I saw. I saw a lot of people pointing to thought. This is the tip of the iceberg for me. A lot of people pointing to cognition. A lot of people pointing to cognitive behavioral therapy, when missing so much more that's arising from within. This is energy coming through. this is an iceberg, and people were looking at the tip of the iceberg, but still feeling horrible inside. And I saw it in like the law of attraction community. People focused so much on thought when really their whole being was sending them messages. When our whole being isn't congruent, there is something called the destructive interference. So we could be thinking a thought, but our body is screaming at us, you know, with other messages that are non-phonetic in the language of the body. So it'd be a sense, an inner sensation in the body. And so if we could bring our loving awareness down to the body and see that, not in an analytical way, not in a cognitive way, in a sensation way, just as you would a child or a pet. They don't speak in a clear language, but they sure send messages to you. That, in a sense, our body is like our wild horse or our child. It's there and it speaks to us. It's subtle and so often gets overlooked. So zooming out, when we look at the whole iceberg, we can begin communing and expressing from a constructive interference, which is so powerful. The creative power. I was homeless. I went from homelessness to living in Hawaii, running a small business in 2 years. And before I even met my Prince Charming. And so I just want to share this and scream this from the mountaintops. It isn't, there's all these different fields like law of attraction, non-duality, cognitive behavioral therapy, the energetic experience, but it's all expressing from one human being. It's energy flowing through you, just as you would blow through a flute. This is the instrument of consciousness. This is the link between the form and formless, but we overlook it. And I've been working people since 2014, since before my daughter was in her accident, and then came to Hawaii and started working with people in this little tiny village, this little store. And one person is here from that store.
We love you, Renee.
And it was such an honor. I didn't know what I was saying or how to articulate it until I met Rudy and now Dr. Porges. But there is a proven science, over 400 peer reviews, that the energy flows from bottom to top. It makes so much sense.
Can I talk about that?
Yes, sorry.
Right. So don't take my word for it. There's something called the torus or the toric field. Every single living thing, I mean, you can look at this. This isn't a belief. This is proven, from an apple to a seed, to a tree, to a human, to a planet. A planet has a torus, a toric field. This way this energy moves. It's kind of, let's draw a person. Okay, so if you've got a person here, ay caramba.
Sorry, use this one.
Thank you. I learned the ay caramba from Jules because she's from Mexico. Okay, so if you've got a person, the torus fundamentally does this. Energy flows bottom up and round, bottom up and round. Galaxies, it's inherent geometrical energetic structure in nature. So it's very well proven. So all you have to do is Google toric field and you can see it around universes, apples, peoples, and anything that's alive. Now, Jules literally, after her near-death experience, saw the toric field around people and she saw how energy moved. Now, when you discover Stephen Porges, what he found with 400 peer-reviewed journals, okay, is that information is bottom up, meaning that information comes into us bottom, going through our body and our nervous systems and up into our cognition and head. About 80 to 95%, the research shows that information is coming bottom up, and only 5 to maybe 20% top down. Those are Stephen Porges's terminology, but fundamentally, what Jules saw was then later confirmed by peer-reviewed journals that actually the energy moves this way. Okay. So with that insight, I want to talk a bit about trauma and the body a little bit more. Now, what we have found is, well, not we have found, what this big community have found of literally millions of people, is that if you've had trauma at some stage, it could be in utero, it could be something that you can't remember, okay, that energetic signature or frequency is stored in the energetic field of your body. Now, you could argue, no, trauma can't be stored in the body, because if you think traumatic thoughts, you feel traumatized. Well, yeah, I taught that for 20 years and I was also wrong. And I had to get humbled. So let's zoom out. The physical body, okay, is fundamentally energy. In fact, if anyone thinks the physical body isn't energy, tell me what it's made out of in the chat. I'll be really interested to hear. Okay. Energy holds information, or indeed is information. All the research shows that space isn't empty, it is full of information. So although you've got this weird fleshy thing here you can press, it's not less spiritual than energy, because it is energy. So the body will hold information, because that's what information does. It holds information. And that information in the body, we have found, will cause problems for people as they go through life. And it is not addressed by analysis, cognition, and thinking. It is before. You need to look at the expanded energetic nature. So I want to make this more practical. I'm going to talk for a bit, and then I'd love you to talk about your clients, your client work. So for instance, when I met Jules, it was a complete eye-opener for me. You started talking about polyvagal this, top down that, and I thought, what the hell was all this, this about? Yeah, 10 months ago. Mm-hmm. And I'd noticed when I meditated or went within, there was this sensation in my solar plexus. And when I really started to understand what Jules was talking about, I experimented and I got really deep, very relaxed, and went into the sensation in my solar plexus. I wasn't analyzing it. I wasn't identifying with it. I wasn't regressing myself back to the past. I was literally having this open awareness, and I started a communication with it, kind of sensationally, non-verbally. And there was this deep hurt that I'd experienced. And to be transparent, I felt pretty depressed for 2 weeks. I was crying now and again. I didn't have a story attached to it, but I let my body feel how it felt. Okay. And after 2 weeks, I kept checking in with it every day. And then after 2 weeks, it's a little bit like, okay, you're good to go now. That sensation I don't have in my solar plexus. And it's interesting because I had a bad back kind of at the same level of my solar plexus back here, that only yoga and massage could help. And anyway, I don't have it anymore, which is interesting because it's where the solar plexus is located. Yeah. So I want to be clear. We're not talking about thinking about stuff. It isn't cognitive based. It isn't regressive based. It isn't identifying. It isn't like shadow work. It's an unconditional communing within your own bodily energetic field and listening. You're not trying to heal anything. You're not trying to fix anything. You are communing and allowing the body to feel as it feels, to start integrating.
Beautiful.
So Jules here has had loads of one-to-one. So can you talk a little bit about, obviously you won't mention any names, but talk a little bit about the clients you have seen and you've helped them with this and the before and after for these
Right.
guys.
Well, so what I want to say, it is trauma isn't necessarily an outside event. It's how your body responds to it.
Beautiful.
And can be subtle, very subtle. It can show up as a self-destructive. It can show up as maybe in your business, procrastination. It can show up something, like that. But again, I'm going back to the energy, the destructive interference that's expressed from the body. And once we recognize that, we can reverse engineer. And that's what I do. And sometimes it's just, extremely disabling for people, where it's debilitating, where they can't get out of bed. So all of that reverse engineered back to our whole one system, and we go from there. So ask me questions.
Talk specific. I can't mention any names, but there's been specific people that you've worked with, naming no names again, but talk about what they're like before, how long they'd been around trying to help themselves, and what they were like afterwards.
Right. Well, few people have done so many things, have been in certain communities for years and have seen all the great names. But again, they're focusing on thought. And it's debilitating for them and they can't get out of bed. So what I do is I work with them to recognize and honor these subtle sensations and what it is trying to say, whether it's just comfort or it's fearful, anything like that. But I try to do it in a way that we don't use our analytical mind to analyze what it's trying to say. We reach down and comfort it at a body level, at a somatic level. There's these subtle sensations and impulses when you can bring your loving awareness and recognize that you have a whole kingdom in here that's asking for help. You can, it's really hard to describe because I work with people.
Well, I'm not saying how you do it, because we wouldn't recommend any of you go and start communing with that, because
you're gonna have to ask me questions.
We've had our students do that, but they've been supported. They've supported one another, and they've had mentoring with us to go through that journey. So if you don't have a community to support you, I wouldn't recommend doing it. So
3 people came to me wanting help going through divorce. They're going through divorce. 2 of those 3 people, they've stopped the divorce. 1 of the 3 people are getting back together. So it's that sort of thing when they understand that the outward expression is pointing to something so deep, so subtle inside of them. 2 people came to me. They were on what I didn't know. I'm a nurse, but I didn't know that they were on quite a bit of medication. In working with me, they went off their medication. I didn't tell them to, nor did they tell me that they were doing that, but they did it. They tapered themselves off. And so it's that sort of reverse engineering back to the subtle messages, non-cognitive, non-analytical messages that our body is trying to tell us. When our behavior, our gut, our heart, and our head are all congruent, it magnifies the creative power in our world. And that's what I do. That's how I help them.
Like one lady, she had crippling anxiety, panic attacks. There was this terrorization within her own head, and it's, if any of you have ever experienced that or going through that, it's not pleasant, because wherever you go, your head goes with you. So there's all these thoughts of self-loathing, of anxiety. She'd been around and understanding for 20 years, and it was looking at what was going on in her head. It didn't help that much. So when Jules took it down, what had happened um, well, she had got raped when she was very young, and she felt dirty. She felt all the stuff that may arise for you from that experience. Okay. Now, that was stored in her energetic body. Like it was stored in here, okay, as a body. And all of the work up here did nothing for her because it's an energetic signature in the body. As Jules worked with her, it's gritty.
Yeah.
It's not like you have an insight and everything's great. You go within, you commune, and it can be gritty and it can be painful, okay? But with that unconditional love for all parts of herself, with that unconditional integration, that energy frequency changed. And guess what happened then? Those terrorizing thoughts ceased to pop up into her head because the root cause of them were resolved. The thinking was never the problem. The thinking was a side effect of a deeper energetic hurt that she was ignoring.
Yeah.
Now, there's been lots of different versions of that with different people and different symptoms. But when I taught a certain understanding, I got the odd client I couldn't help. Why? Because I wasn't looking at the whole of them like we are now.
This is something I know I've said before, but William James in 1890 was trying to tell the world of psychology that I can't remember his quote, but the thought is after the fact of your inner physiology. So the thought, in other words, he was saying the thought is reflective, or he's saying thought is a reflection of your inner energetic dwelling, but those weren't his words. And he wrote something called the James Lang theory, and then moved out of psychology after that because it was quite poo-pooed. Dr. Anthony Damasio took all of William James's work and wrote a book about it. It's called Descartes' Error. And he's proven that the information has to go through the feeling centers of the brain in order for a cognitive thought to be. So, but you can look that up. But what are you showing them?
I've just put a link. I put Dan and then a link.
Oh.
This is Dan Siegel, who's one of the people around the bottom up, meaning information's coming through the nervous system and the body, and obviously cognition and thinking's in there too. That is part of the whole.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to do, I wanted to go to the break to let these guys. Is there anything you want to say before we stop?
That's it.
Okay. Yes. So we're going to have a 5-minute break. Okay. I'm going to turn our cameras off. If you don't have any questions, what we'll ask you to do is just stay on. Press that link and listen to Dan talk about the bottom-up understanding. It's only 2.5 minutes long. And obviously when we end those links, so the link to the first link, Innate Evolution Blogs, is our interview with Dr. Stephen Porges. He's the guy that's written 400 research papers on this stuff. So those are the links to keep you interested. For people who have comments or questions, anything at all, we would love you to put it in the chat. Okay. And in the 5-minute break, we're going to look at the chat and then we can come back and specifically talk about where you're from, what you think, if you disagree, agree, if it's helpful or not, whatever it is, we want to hear from you. Okay. So let's have 5 minutes. So it's 9:35 here in Hawaii. So let's come back at 40 minutes past or 20 minutes to. See you in 5 minutes. Here you go. Okay, that was a very quick break here. So we've got a few questions. Okay, so one of the questions is, isn't trauma just untrue thinking? And wouldn't seeing as thought clear the trauma? That's a very common question, and thank you for asking that. So what we found is you can have an experience. Okay, let's explain this. When you're a baby, you're all nervous system. When you're a toddler, you're kind of all nervous system. You're not really thinking about there's these impulses and these reactions. If anyone has ever parented a toddler, they know they're just responsive and reactive in the moment. They're not thinking about, oh, I pooed my diaper, poor mummy, she's going to have to clear it up. They're not thinking that. They're just in the moment. Now, in this community of literally millions of people, many people have something within their bodies before they really have the capacity to think about it. Because it's a precognitive experience.
Yeah.
Literally, people have worked from experiences in the womb when they hadn't even been born. There's been stuff there.
That's the first line of communication. When the sperm meets the egg, there's something called a zinc flash and then a zinc wave. Every single cell in your body has an intrinsic rhythm, an intrinsic contraction and expansion. And everything in your body communicates with one another. When we were in our mother's womb, we communicated with the environment, whether it was increased cortisol or quite DHEA, which is healing. But a lot of these predictive mechanisms, these impulses, these sensations, you receive data and then you have this bottom-up predictive mechanism. It's necessary for survival. It's necessary. We would not survive as a species if we did not have these precognitive bottom-up predictive mechanisms. So that's how babies live. Their higher cortical functions are very primitive. The brain isn't fully developed until some say males are 22. Sorry, guys. Females are 22 and males are 28. But so it's fully myelinated at that time. And before that, children are all nervous systems. They have to be to survive. We have to have these predictive mechanisms to survive. Sometimes what happens is these predictive mechanisms, if practiced over and over and over again, they get stuck, not broken. This doesn't mean you're broken, but they get stuck. So communing with that at a sensation level is how we integrate that. We relax it, we notice it, and we integrate it back into our whole being. So but we notice it, if we really, how it works is we have there's always a stimulus, then there's a sensation and impulse. If that sits around long enough, it's in the emotional center of the body, goes up to the heart, passes through the feeling centers of the brain, and then out pops a thought. But we don't notice that. All we notice is the very clear language of a thought. So it pops out kind of like a readout. I think I've told a lot of my students, oh, I see what's going on inside. We have to recognize that this thought that we're thinking is it's a mirror and it's pointing to something deeper. It's like the little child trying to commune with us, trying to ask us to notice it. But we can't until we go into the body and speak the somatic language. We teach our students somatic literacy, and that's just recognizing the sensations and impulses in the body.
Because out of interest here, hands up who someone has said something or there's been something going on in the world and you found yourself instantly reacting, getting defensive, getting angry very, very quickly. Like it's so quick that you find yourself going blah, 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 blah. And then you go, oh my God, wow, what's going on? Hands up who's experienced that themselves.
Yeah.
We could, and maybe triggers disrespectful, but we all have this. A lot of our reactions are completely automatic. We're not doing it on purpose. They're just this like that. Okay. Now that is, in a sense, the nervous system responding, and then you think about it later because it's so quick. And
I want it. So after you asked me to talk about it in the break, because I had that huge insight, I had a near death, In
Yes.
October 2014, they took my son. I was living in a campground in a tent and homeless. And then the state came and took my son. I had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I had compartmentalized all of these ailments and a specialty doctor to attend to each. I was very chopped up as a whole being. So I speak so strongly about this, but I had a sudden cardiac arrest, but I was able to see energy after that. And what happened is that just because I had that huge insight, just because I could see, and people from then were at a distance, it wasn't until 2017 or maybe end of 2016 when I arrived to Hawaii that I worked through my predictive mechanisms that were there. I had to commune with the body at a somatic level. I had to commune with what was arising in my physical being, because until then I was expressing what I call a destructive resonance. It was, I was thinking this positive thought, but my body was screaming, hell no. It cancels each other out, just like noise canceling earphones. That's exactly what happens. So that's why law of attraction really.
So yeah, it's a bit like our son Seth, who was taken from Jules. He was in, am I allowed to say?
Yeah.
The foster care system until we managed to get a lawyer and get him back. Long story. When he got back, he'd experienced some pretty terrible things.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we innocently said, so Seth, have you got any homework? I don't have any homework. It's fine. Blah, 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 blah. And we couldn't even mention homework without him immediately having a behavior. We couldn't ask a simple question like, Seth, how are you doing? What do you mean, how am I doing? There's all these predictive responses. Now, knowing what we know, we saw that these are automatic responses that our poor boy was reacting from. He wasn't doing it on purpose. And every time that reaction, we spoke to him about it calmly, and sometimes not so calmly.
Yeah.
Because parents are humans, as you well know. And we pointed out, and sometimes I literally had to say, Seth, I'm going to ask you about homework now. Okay. And I prepare him. And then what happens? This sensation arises, and we've taught him to look at the sensation, and then he can calm down.
Yeah, to recognize, to bring his awareness. There's all these different, unique, you could call them practices or doing, but really what we do as a family is we nurture and we comfort and we provide safety to our body when we're having these predictive mechanisms, these necessary, inevitable predictive mechanisms that we as a human require to survive. Like just walking down the hall to his room, he would stand up and he would be fearful. Yeah. And by the way, he goes, you tell anybody my story, Mom.
He's given us permission.
Yeah. And so, he's a cutie pie. But then in doing so, he's standing up because, oh my gosh, I'm doing it again.
Yeah, his awareness.
I'm standing at attention. And I said, yes, you are. And he's like, whoa. So, and I heard him on the phone talking to his friends and comforting his friend who was having a troubling time. And that was just the biggest gift, because he's sharing this with his friends at school, and he's comforting them when they need comfort, because it works.
So that link, scroll up in the chat, that's a link to the interview we did with Dr. Stephen Porges, and he goes into the science and the research and explains this kind of more scientifically. So if you're interested, have a look at that. If you don't believe energy goes bottom up, Google the toric field or torus, and you'd see anything that's alive moves in that pattern energetically. So that's pretty good. That's about 45 minutes. That's quite good for us. So before we go, put in the chat is this helpful? Is this unhelpful? What is your experience of this very brief, just dipping your toe into the language? Somatic literacy means understanding the language of the body. A very brief intro to the body and how that can help with your clients and your family members.
Right. In any aspect, in business, in nature of creation, in relationship, in parenting. It's what it means to be human and reverse engineering back to what's going on in the body.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. While you're writing,
I wanted to say something to Krista because I saw that you said pharmacology. Oh, there you are, Krista. I was like, pharmacology. And that like triggered something inside of me because I'm, a nurse. We were trained, I'm almost angry. Oh, caramba.
So while you're putting...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was thinking what you asked, like what methodologies are we trained in? And I'm a nurse too. And so like I have all this, 3P and meditation, but I was like, oh, we're trained to look at everything as biochemical as well.
Right.
And yeah.
And there's a remedy for each ailment, right? That we were drilled into our head. Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So just to sum up while you're leaving messages, and I read them after this, is whether you're a coach, therapist, facilitator, whether you're a husband, wife, if you have kids or have parents, if you're human,
yes,
communicating with other humans, whatever your label or your profession, when you see the whole pie chart,
or the whole iceberg.
Our spirit isn't in our bodies. Our bodies are in our spirit because our spirit is entangled within the infinite ocean of existence and information. And our bodies are transceivers, receivers of information in the field, and it comes through our nervous system, our bodies, like all of us. Knowing how beautifully, wonderfully, unboundedly whole within one power, expressing as you, that you are, include the body, and you're including more, you're giving respect to more of the person right in front of your eyes.
It enriches your life.
Let's have a look. Helpful and what do you want to do? I'm going from the top down.
Right here. Start there.
Renee, I forgot to add that I'm more in tune with my body because of the trauma course and in check with it all the time.
Yeah.
I have created better relationships with my body. It's such a good way to live. Beautiful. Helpful and edifying and loving. Thank you. Very helpful. How do you spell the field? I'm not sure what that means. Fantastic. Always so helpful listening to you both. Thank you very much. Very helpful. Thank you. Affirmations to invite presence in the body. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
I like that. Presence in the body. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, guys, that's it. We're doing a free webinar every Monday, and every webinar we're going to look at all parts of one entangled, unsplittable wholeness of being.
Yeah.
So same time, same place every Monday for a bit, and we'll look forward to seeing you very soon. Lots of thank yous. Beautiful. Okay, guys, before you go, click those links so you can see the Dr. Porges interview, and we really recommend watching the Dan Siegel 2.5-minute clip.
Yeah.
Where he's talking about experiencing nature with the sensations of the body rather than identifying everything cognitive. It's a really beautiful clip. Okay, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lots of love to you, and we'll see you next Monday. Bye for now. Bye, guys. Lots of love.